Welcome to the first tutorial. This is to get developers familiar with Java primarily, started learning building applications on the Westmont App Platform. So look at my screen right here. I'm going to first start by going to this URL right here, wiki.mccollum.enterprises, and then I'm going to click on the Westmont app. This page is going to be here for containing all the resources you guys might need when you're building some of these projects. So in order to get started, you need at least the very basic SDK, which provides authentication and authorization. And if you're not familiar with the difference between authentication and authorization, you might want to Google those terms. So I'm going to start by going to SDK. Under the SDK, currently I just have Java. And then you're going to click this link here to download the starter project. So I'm going to download the starter project, and that's getting saved. Alright, now I'm going to open Eclipse, and you can use probably any other IDE that you like, but I'm going to show you guys how to do this using Eclipse. So I'm going to do this in a new workspace so you guys can see what this would be like if you've never opened one of these files before. Alright, so Eclipse is going to open up. So this is my first time opening Eclipse in this workspace. It doesn't know who I am. Alright. My Vim plugin is installed, that's nice. Now I'm going to have to unzip that file. So I'm just going to do that in a terminal. And I'm going to do first, now that I'm in the downloads folder, I'm going to do unzip KEE starter project, and then I now have a folder called starter project. So I'm going to move the starter project folder to where my workspace is, which is workspace, which is my home directory, which is signified by that tilde, and then workspace.tutorial. You can use this. You can do this in a GUI, but why would you do it in a GUI? So now it's in my workspace. Now I'm going to do import general existing projects into workspace. I'm going to select my workspace as my starting folder, and then it's going to find the starter project. I'm going to hit finish, and it's going to open it up. It's going to make sure that it's in the right folder and everything. Alright, so Maven's going to complain, so you see that little red X. Don't worry about that. Alright, now it's just changed to a warning, and I'll show you guys what the warning is, just so you know what to expect. Show view problems. And then this is complaining about the fact that certain things are missing from the IDE that would provide some extras for me. But that doesn't really matter. Again, plain old Eclipse will do. If you download Eclipse for Java EE developers, that's going to be better, but regular Eclipse is just fine. So if I go to source main Java, well, that's going to contain all the Java resources. As you can see here, there's a thing for Maven dependencies, so it shows you what the Maven dependencies are. If you're not familiar already with Maven, Maven is a dependency management framework. It allows you to keep track of third-party libraries. So let's say my buddy Jared writes a library for handling rich text, and it's designed to put it into a database in a format that the database can understand, and it keeps track of fonts, formatting, that sort of thing. So I want to use that in my project because I have a mobile app that's going to use the client library, and then I have a web page that's going to render it. So I would include that in Maven. And Maven uses this file here called pom.xml. And I'm going to show you, so you can look at the overview, you can look at the dependencies, or you can just look at the POM itself. I typically look at the POM itself, and then I just look for this group here called dependencies, and this is written in XML, so pretty standard stuff. This group here, dependency, says, okay, look for the Java EE API. It needs to be provided for you. That's basic. We're going to run this on a Java EE server, so not to worry. Another dependency here is the server-side auth client, which is actually going to handle the authentication and authorization for you. And then here we have a make file, and if you guys aren't familiar with make, well, this will be at least an introduction for you. Now, I didn't have to use make. You can actually do a lot of this with Maven, but I do a lot of C programming, and so I did it with make. So what this is doing right here is it's saying when you compile this, you're going to default to making server, and the server thing is defined here. The server requires pom.xml to be present, and essentially adding this layer of abstraction where we're using make to then invoke Maven allowed me to easily insert an extra step in the process, which was, okay, generate your project, build all the code, but before you actually get to Maven where you make the web archive that you're going to actually run, it's actually going to insert documentation from your code into the web page, so that when you go to the web page for your app, you can actually see your documentation right there. And that's going to be helpful for you. It's going to be helpful for other programmers. And it's how Jared and I have been doing this project so far. So wanted to provide you guys with the same tools that we had. Clean essentially is, okay, there was something wonky with the build, didn't work right, we had some problems, clear it out, blow it away, delete the temporary files, delete the classes that got compiled, let's make sure that everything is gone, and then you're just left with the source. And then once you've done a clean, you can say, okay, now let's try to rebuild again. So you may have seen this kind of thing before if you look at the screen again. Project clean in Eclipse. So that's what the make file is for. This file, api.doc.json, if you guys aren't familiar with JSON syntax, you guys should look up a video on that. Just pause it here, go do that. Now, this JSON file, api.doc.json, that's actually used by our make file to generate that documentation for the API. So you can see this project I've called the Starter Project API. We don't need that. And we're going to just rename it to something. So why don't we use this to create something that essentially just keeps track of the number of people currently in the DC right now. So if we were going to do something like that, DC line, I'll just call it that. And if you guys are wondering what I'm doing with this weird looking text editor, you guys are going to want to Google Vim. This is the text editor that I'm using. And we're going to call it the DC line information for Westmont. 0.0.1. And if you guys want to see the framework that we're using to do the generation of the API documentation, Google API Doc. API Doc is what we're using. So I have a bunch of stuff in my Maven dependencies. It's all there. It's what I needed. Now we're ready to actually look at our application. So I provided you guys with a path config, and this API path config file, without going into a long explanation, it just specifies the base URL of the entire project. Or rather, at least this specifies the base URL of the REST API portion. So the beginning of every URL is going to be /API. So if the base URL of your entire application was something like jenkins.cs.westmont.u /DC line, the start of the JAX-RS, the start of the REST API would be /API. So every URL would look something like that, plus people number, something like that. So you don't probably need to edit that file at all, but if you feel the need, go in there, change the API path from API to whatever your heart's desire is. Now in here, in the starter project API package, there's a sample service, and sample service is going to be used as kind of a starting place. I'm gonna make this big so that you guys can look at the entire file. So the SDK provides the framework that does authentication, and authentication establishes identity. Authorization gives you permission to do things once your identity has been established. So essentially what you can see here is that all of these API endpoints are protected by the SDK. So if you guys aren't familiar with what Java annotations are, all of these @path, @context, @get, @employee types only, all of these are Java annotations. And they kind of look a little bit like functions or maybe even constructors, and they kind of are actually, but essentially what they do is they're not a class and they're not an interface. They're an annotation, which is a totally separate type. But each class can have annotations or functions or more member variables. So you can see this security context object has an @context annotation over the top of it, and what that does is tells the Java Enterprise Platform, hey, whatever security information about the user or guest or whatever is present, whatever we know, put that in that variable. So you guys may notice here there's no constructor. There aren't any variables that do getting and setting. All the variables in here in this class right now get actually set by Java before any of your functions get called. So by putting @context above a security context object, you're basically saying, give me the security information. And then as soon as your function runs, you can just pretend like the value is already there. And so if the value is there, all of this will work properly. If the value is not there, well, then the user wasn't authorized. And let's see, are there any functions? So let's make a new function. So we're going to make it a get, an HTTP GET request, and we're going to make it on the path /capacity public I'm going to return 0 for now, just so we'll stop complaining. Essentially what this is doing is declaring a function that I can call no matter who I am. So all of these other functions have an annotation above them that says employee types only. And what that means is that I can pass in a list, like down here. Let me see, one second guys, let me show you. Let me turn on line numbers in this. Measures, extenders, show line numbers. Yeah, okay. Alright, so on line 40, you guys can see how there's student and community declared in kind of like an array, and that tells the Westmont App SDK not to allow anyone to call that function without having them be either a student or a member of the community. Now, these words are dependent on what Westmont's doing currently, but current IT practice says community members are donors to the school, some alumni, not too many, but I'm not sure where the line gets drawn there, and then students are basically anyone who's actually a current student. So there's a few functions in here that specify you can only call this function if you're a student. There's only you can only call this function if you have a login, which would be the case of line 24. So if you have a login with Westmont, you can call that function starting on line 25, the get time function. Now the get capacity function is going to be entirely public, so anyone can call this function without being a member of the Westmont community at all. Now, you guys are probably also wondering, what are these app path annotations saying? Alright, so the app path annotations, I'm just going to write some code in here. Actually, no. I'm going to open a terminal so you guys can see what I'm doing. So let's pretend like our API has a URL. We've finished our app. We are actually returning a real number here on line 20. We've implemented the functionality. So if I was going to call the application on a server, I would say something like curl. And if you guys are familiar with curl, curl is used to make HTTP calls, so like your web browser. So you can actually do this in a web browser as well, but I'm just going to use curl so that you guys can see the content of the request. I'm going to put I so you can see the headers, and then I'm going to put HTTP sample, since this project is actually online, sample.wmapp.com.enterprises, and then I'm going to do /API/ let me see, workspace tutorial start a project. Okay. I'm going to open this. Okay. So we have so now that I've edited this file and I've added this capacity function, I'm going to do math.random times 100, and I'm going to do math.for. Alright, yeah. So I'm going to create a random number from 0 to 100 by using math.random times 100, and then I'm going to round that down, so it's going to be anywhere from 0 to 99, and then I'm going to return that. So now that I've done that, let's say I'm done with my code. So I'm going to have a URL for this that's going to be like starterproject.org/API/line, right, which is on line 12 over here, and then /capacity. So that's gonna actually give me the capacity of the line at the DC, or the total number of people that we can allow. So now that I'm ready to actually deploy my project, I've implemented the functionality that I want. I'm going to put this online. So I'm inside the starter project directory. I've moved there in the terminal by doing cd workspace.tutorial/starter project. Now I'm going to actually build it. So I'm going to do make clean just to be safe, and then I'm going to do make. Alright, now that I've done that, I'm going to go to my web browser, and I'm going to sign in to a page that you guys don't yet have access to, but I'm going to use this for the demo purposes. So I'm going to do add deployment, upload a new deployment, and I'm going to go to workspace.tutorial, starter project, and then I'm going to go inside the target folder, which is where everything that gets built actually gets packaged, and you can see there's this starterproject.war, and I'm going to open that file and hit next, and then I'm going to hit finish, and that's going to be deployed. Now I can go back here and I already created a starter test file for you guys. So since you guys have all done Python, you guys should be able to understand this pretty well. Now I implemented it in Python 2, but it's pretty much the same as Python 3. I mean, you can go back and forth. So just open the text file, the testservice.py, and I'm going to put in the URL that we want to access. So let me see here. Right now, okay, so you can see the server that it's on is wmap.mccollum.enterprises, and it's under /starter project. And I'll explain to you guys in a minute how it got to that URL, and then I'm going to explain the rest. Now, if we go back here to the API path config file, you guys will notice there's /API. So first we're going to put /API because that's the start of our REST API stuff, is all under /API. Now I'm going to go here into the sample service class, and you can see it has another path attribute, which is line. So now I'm going to append /line onto starter project /API. So I have the server that it's on /starter project, which is the name of the project, /API, which is what we defined in the API path config, /line, which is the path that's defined on line 12 of the sample service. And now we're going to want to use our capacity function. So let me see. Let me just take a break here, go back. I'm going to do this with curl so you guys can see it. So I'm going to do curl Actually, you know what? I'm going to use a web browser so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go, let me see, what's our path? So we're going to go in our web browser to www.enterprises/starterproject/API from our API path config /line/capacity. Alright, so it doesn't know what to put for that. It's confused. Couldn't find message body writer for object of type. Now that's probably going to be an error that you guys are going to encounter. So here's what you're going to have to do. Since it says it's expecting media type text/HTML, probably going to want to modify this a little bit. So let's make this a string, and then we're going to do string dot value of, and we're going to wrap our random number. So now I'm going to go back to here, do make clean after I saved my file. I'm going to do make. Alright, it's finishing, build success. Now, starterproject.war is deployed. So I'm going to hit replace, and then I'm going to replace it, hit that, and hit finish. Now, capacity is 1, capacity was 71, so all I'm doing is going to the same URL, and it's giving me a random number between 1 and 100. Let's see, if I want to get rid of that decimal point, I'm going to change my code here. I'm going to cast it to an integer. I'm going to go back here, make clean, and I'm going to do make inside the project folder. Now it's going to rebuild it. Now that it cleared all the files out with make clean, I'm going to rebuild it so that now I have a new project, a new package to deploy. Now I'm going to go back here, I'm going to say replace, I'm going to replace starterproject.war, and I'm going to hit finish. It's going to redeploy starterproject.war successfully replaced. So now I can go back to my web browser, and I still have the same URL. So I'm just going to refresh the page, and that decimal point is going to disappear. Look at that. So there's your introduction to the basics of building a REST API on top of this SDK. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great night, guys.